Good afternoon, everyone. Today, you're listening to an episode of Mindfulness, Sexuality, and Relationships, and our topic is sexuality and cigarettes. And I am Anita DeFrancesco, your host, modern sex and relationship coach. This podcast today, we are featuring Mr. Rocky Rosen, who calls himself the Cigarette Whisperer, and he is going to talk to us today about how cigarettes affect one's entire sexual being. And you'll be able to find this podcast on my Tantra Wisdom group page as well as the SoundCloud. Good afternoon, Rocky. How are you today?
I'm great, Anita. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. It's a hot day here on the East Coast.
Well, it's warm here on the West Coast, too. I'm out in L.A.
Yes. So from what I understand, you have been working with people and helping people to, kick the habit, so to speak, of smoking. And it's something that you speak from experience, something that you've had a lot of different challenges with over the years, as well as really seeing people on the road to quitting cigarettes. So tell me about yourself. You call yourself the Cigarette Whisperer. Where does that title come from?
Well, actually, it came from a doctor here in L.A. who uses my services all the times for her clients. And she would always say, if she's pretty well known. She does breast reconstruction and deals with breast cancer. And whenever she has a patient that smokes, she'd say, I want you to go see this guy. They would say, who is he? She goes, I don't know. He's the Cigarette Whisperer. I send him patients that smoke. He sends me back patients that don't. And so I love that title, and I'm running with it.
Interesting. I love it. It's very mysterious. So in talking about sexuality, cigarettes, I feel, sexually speaking, is that it can, affect the body on many different cellular levels and can inhibit the flow of one's, orgasmic flow during their sexuality. Over time,
and female.
Male and female, and over time. So do you want to elaborate about that a little bit?
Well, when you smoke or when you do nicotine, so that means also when you vape, your blood vessels are constricting, your blood is polluted. What it takes to have a strong erection, what it takes to have a strong orgasm for a woman is a really good blood flow, and smoking inhibits it. That's one. Two, it's a turnoff for many people, so smokers really limit themselves to the choices of lovers and people they can choose in their life who will be willing to be with them. So that's another way it can affect it. Many times I've heard people say, I wanted to see this person, but they refused to see me because I smoked. So there goes the lovemaking. There goes the love.
So why would they be offended by that? You mean because of the taste in the mouth, or just the whole essence of that? So that's one area that's an issue about if one smokes and one doesn't, the taste, the smell. But then the other issue is, over time, medically, physiologically, can affect the sexual being in many different ways as far as having a stronger, better sex life. So go ahead, continue what you're saying here about this.
Well, but then again, when you want to talk about love, we're going to go. If we can talk about love. A smoker, when I work with a person, I'll always ask them, in your life, who or what comes first? They'll tell me their significant other, their kids, their dogs, their job, God, themselves, and it's not true. When a person's a smoker, a cigarette comes before everything and everyone else. When people think about quitting smoking, they think it's, quitting smoking. It's not. It's ending a long-term evil one-sided relationship. Where the smoker may love the cigarettes just don't give a damn about the smoker.
Oh.
And it affects appearances. There are these fascinating pictures of identical twins where one's a smoker and where one isn't, and to watching the aging process for the smoker. And if I always tell my clients, look, if it's withering you on the outside, it's withering you on the inside as well.
So the physical appearance of someone can not be as youthful looking if they smoke, even if they are young in age. Over time, it closes up, clogs the pores in the connective tissue, and this affects the whole system as far as even the way they eat, what they're eating, and what they're tasting. It affects the sensory system. And in Tantra and sexuality, the sensory system is key. And with breathing techniques and things like that, we're teaching people how to open up the senses. And if you're a smoker, you're actually doing the complete opposite, which can shut down the system. Can you talk a little bit about that?
How it shuts things down?
Yeah, I mean, how it would affect, the sensory system of the body. I mean, the
smoking affects every organ, every cell, every breath. It affects it all. And I'm not anti-smoking. I don't care if people smoke or not. I do care if they wish they didn't. I'm not an arbiter. I don't condone or condemn anybody who smokes. I just don't care if you smoke or not. I do care if you wish you didn't. And if you wish you didn't, it's because you're suffering consequences on so many different levels that you just wish weren't there. As far as sensory goes, it's going to affect it affects all five senses. It affects every cell. It affects every organ.
Right. So it's at a deeper level, and people don't realize this. And as they, progress in age and within their relationship, there's a lot of different blockages and challenges that surface while in a relationship. So if we are working on our breathing and we're working on different parts of our humanness just to keep the relationship moving and flowing and staying alive, so to speak, the senses are key. And smoking and having a good diet they're not the things you want to do when you want to promote good health and a healthy relationship.
I agree.
Yes. And so here's a question for you. Why smoking again with cigarettes or alcohol and drugs? What is the whole difference here, and what is the challenge? Why are smokers more challenged than the drug user or the alcoholic?
Well, people often say stopping smoking is tougher than stopping drugs or alcohol. And I'll ask people who have a problem with drugs and alcohol who are still smoking, do you remember the day before you got sober? And they'll tell me, yes, it was a horrible, horrible day. They hit their bottom. They lost their family. They lost their job. They lost their reputation. See, with drugs and alcohol, you have a threefold aspect to this addiction. It's a physical craving, it's a mental obsession, and it's a malady of the spirit, because it takes people away from who they are. Tobacco is just a twofold addiction. It's mental and physical. It doesn't have the spiritual malady. People don't hit the same bottom with cigarettes the way people hit a bottom with drugs and alcohol. For that reason, since you don't hit that embarrassment, that humiliation, that people will think stopping smoking is tougher than stopping doing drugs and alcohol. They do hit their bottom when they heart attack, when they stroke, when they're cancered. But even then, a lot of people still come to me who are post-surgery, who are post-heart attack. I was recently featured on the TV show The Doctors, helping a woman who had a massive heart attack at 27, who was now in her early 30s, helping her stop smoking. Do you want to know why people still smoke? Do you want to know why?
Okay. Well, I want to stay focused on this a minute. So when you're talking about people hitting their bottom, now what I want to bring that into the sexual part of this. People hitting their bottom, when they do drugs or alcohol, but they don't hit that same bottom with cigarettes. But sexually speaking, couples do hit their bottom in a relationship.
Oh yeah.
And in the relationship, there are many different factors that can, attribute to the relationship sinking, so to speak, or not keeping it abreast. And a lot of this, which my business, we teach Tantra, teaching people how to keep the surface. And again, healthiness is a good way to start. Even if you practice yoga, if you're doing some healthy breathing, you won't hit the bottom of your sexualness if you're healthy. So that's just one factor. I mean, you may, but okay, let's get into why do people smoke? Was the question you wanted to address right now?
The entire reason why people smoke is to try to make the urge to smoke go away. In other words, a person will smoke because they're trying to end the Jones, the withdrawal. But as a result, they're in a constant state of withdrawal. So it's just this self-fulfilling cycle that keeps taking you further and further down. I hate myself for smoking. I need a cigarette. It's the only reason why people smoke is to try to make the urge to smoke go away. As a result, the urge is always there.
So it's an addiction.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me rephrase that. It's an addiction for me. I totally believe smoking is an addiction, but I only believe that for myself. My mother, who died of lung cancer back in 95, I think she was addicted, but I don't know. I never was her. That's something you've got to decide for yourself. I mean, stopping smoking is stupid simple. Do you want to know the $1 billion secret to quitting smoking, to quitting drinking, to quitting drugging?
What is that?
Don't take the next hit.
Okay.
See, it's stupefyingly simple. It's just not easy.
Okay, so here's what I want to say on. Now, you just mentioned about hating the self. So would you say that people who smoke, okay, it may or may not be an addiction, but people who smoke nicotine, they have a hate for the self, or is there a lower self-esteem in an individual who takes on nicotine?
Most frequently, there's a lower self-esteem. I'm not going to say they hate themselves. They hate the urges.
They hate the urges. Okay.
You see, when a person comes to me, it's because they hate the urge to smoke, but they love the cigarettes. And what I do is I flip that for them. I teach them how to really come to dig the urges to smoke, but hate the cigarettes. It's funny, since we're talking about sexuality, I always say cigarettes are shaped perfectly. They're just little pricks that want to hurt people. You may love them. They don't even know you exist.
Okay.
And the end result of smoking is no different than the end result of AIDS, of Ebola, where you just have totally wasted away. It would be so nice if I could smoke and then one day just drop dead. But that happens very rarely. What happens is the gradual deterioration. As one of my clients told me, that you just melt away. And you melt away years younger than you should have.
Okay, and this is with the work that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now getting back to the sexuality of it, people can, hating the self and low self-esteem, and I think that this type of character in someone is more than just from being a cigarette smoker. I think that maybe there's emotional challenges there, and within the relationship or in the sexual life or even outside of that. So what I would recommend for people is to start to love themselves and learn some techniques. And some of the things that we teach in Tantra is to teach people how to have this relationship to the self and how breathing in life is much more beneficial for their whole sexual being than breathing in nicotine. So what we provide is emotional cleansing work, and what you do, you're doing a lot more mindfulness work. Is that correct?
Exactly right. This is all very mindful. By the way, do you want to know what nicotine is?
Well, nicotine, I know from what I understand, growing up with smoking parents and knowing that they always had so much anger, I always thought it was a poison.
Well, it is. You want to know what kind of poison it is? It's an insecticide. That's its main commercial use. You look it up in any dictionary. The tobacco industry has been brilliant hiding the truth about nicotine in dictionaries. Now, it will kill a cockroach. What will it do with you as you accumulate it over the years? When a person smokes, when a person vapes, when a person chews the nicotine gum, wears the patch, all they're doing all day long is insecticiding themselves. You wonder why your throat feels raw. You wonder why your chest feels tight. You wonder why you feel out of sorts. You wonder why you're not achieving the greatest satisfaction in your sexuality. It's because you're constantly insecticiding yourself. I do not know what is a healthy insecticide for me to ingest. There isn't. There is no safe cigarettes. Vaping is not safe. Now, with about 10 years of studying, they're discovering vapors are suffering with popcorn lung and other situations are coming up. It's how can you insecticide yourself and enjoy the greatest aspects of life? And one of the greatest aspects of life is our sexuality.
So getting to this feeling of people that vape and inhale nicotine, it's as a modern sex and relationship coach, I want to just take a moment and become intimate with what it is, the feeling that one who takes on cigarettes is getting. They are breathing in something and they are hoping that they get a good feeling at the end, or there's some kind of feeling of release or some kind of feeling. I'm just giving you what I'm perceiving. What I perceive is people have a feeling of release or relieve or releasing anger of some sort when they smoke, because it involves breathing. And this whole intimate thing that they have with the cigarette is really, and again, like it is, like you're saying, it's an insecticide. So what is this whole feeling that why are they so connected to this?
Well, what they're hoping for is a moment of relief from the discomfort of the urge. The only reason why people smoke is to get a moment of relief, is to get some relief from the urge.
Right. Now, comparing that to a sexual urge, people have quickies during sexuality because they want to fulfill that urge. So this urge, would there be any comparison with a sexual urge and a cigarette urge? Like an urge, period, an urge for a piece of an urge for a piece of chocolate.
It certainly is no orgasm for any smoker.
But no, actually, cigarette smoking for some people is orgasmic in the way that it makes them feel. And some people, we can't put down or be prejudiced against a cigarette smoker, which I happen to be. But
why?
The thing is, why? Because I grew up with smoking parents, and I was growing up, and I wanted to be on a women's basketball team when they first started, when I was just starting to come out for women back then. And because I grew up in a house with cigarettes, my lungs weren't as strong to run for the ball. So, so I have become prejudiced against the people who smoke. But that was some, but not really prejudice, but really just not wanting to be around it. But this whole thing with the urge, I always felt that when people smoked, they had this urge of release, and it was orgasmic to them. And I see people, it's orgasmic. They have a drink and they smoke. Orgasm, again, getting back to orgasm, is anything. It's not just sexual. An orgasm is a sneeze. An orgasm is something that you have that gives you a fulfillment. So
no smoker gets in. No smoking is orgasmic. What is pleasure to a smoker is coming up to a moment of relief from that discomfort.
The relief from the discomfort.
It doesn't give you pleasure. I'm not going to deny the fact that it feels like pleasure. But what is pleasure to an addict, like it is with a drug addict and alcoholic who stopped getting high years ago, they just drink or drug because they're trying to feel normal, is just coming up to a place of relief.
Okay, so getting back to discomfort, when you have a sexual urge, that can be discomforting if you're horny, so to speak, okay? And if someone is horny and they don't have a lover, and they have to, masturbation is very healthy, but so that's an urge, and we do that to relieve the discomfort. So all of these things psychologically, emotionally are, I wouldn't call them discomforts. I would just call them, the human condition has a need to have pleasure. And pleasure, whatever way the pleasure is that you find. Some people find pleasure. I find pleasure with a nice glass of wine and some cheese and, sitting by the ocean. Well, how do you find pleasure? Tell me how you find pleasure.
I find pleasure playing my piano. I find pleasure being a dad. I find pleasure with orgasm. I find pleasure.
So, again, getting back to orgasm now, this is my profession, that orgasm is anything that is a fulfillment, a release, a sneeze, crying. This is considered orgasm when someone sneezes. It's a release. You feel good. You released a discomfort in the body because you were holding on to the sneeze. And a lot of people hold on to their sneezes because of shame. They don't want to sneeze in front of people. It's loud. It's embarrassing. Or people put them down like, or when they yawn. Even yawning is a form of an orgasm, a form of expression. So cigarettes are fulfilling that pleasurable part of the body, even though it's a negative discomfort because, it's an insecticide, and on some level it's probably creating their cells to become disharmony and angered. That's what I feel, and maybe that's where I don't know, because you've been a smoker yourself, that the discomfort, do they hate smoking? I think people, the ones I know, they enjoy it.
What they enjoy, and, I'm not going to deny the fact that they feel like they enjoy it. But what they enjoy is trying to make the urge to smoke go away. The act of smoking, I always talk about plus 100 to minus 100. Plus 100 is ecstasy, minus 100 is agony, and right between that is a spot of zero, and the zero is a spot of neutrality, relief. When a person, I ask my clients, do you enjoy smoking? And they'll say sometimes. Not everyone, but sometimes. Some cigarettes give absolutely no relief, because no pleasure, because there is no big urge before they lit that cigarette. Then others, after a meal, have a cup of coffee, light up with somebody else, those cigarettes feel kind of good. And then there are moments in life where I really feel like I really need a cigarette, a piece of great news, a piece of horrible news. And some cigarettes seem to have a big payoff. Mm-hmm. And what is pleasure to an addict is just coming from whatever moment of discomfort you're feeling, just coming back to a place of relief, just coming to a place of neutrality. A cigarette never makes a smoker feel as good as an orgasm, as good food, as good wine, as a good conversation with friends, as being there to help somebody. Those are things that give people pleasure. Cigarettes don't give you real pleasure. I'm not going to deny the fact that it feels like pleasure, but it's not real pleasure.
Well, it's
the very best.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I just wanted to interrupt there for a second. I mean, cigarettes were always a form of a fashion back in the 40s. Men would light their cigarettes, and it was a sexual kind of fulfillment to the senses.
Sure.
And she would be dressed, dressed for the evening, and in the Marilyn Monroe days. I mean, the cigarette was, the fashion, and that was.
So let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart.
Right. Okay. There you go.
Okay.
And they were sex symbols. They were icons, actors, and they looked good with a cigarette.
Yeah, they sure did. Except when Humphrey was around 54 and he was dying of esophageal cancer. What Lauren Bacall used to do was she used to pick him up out of the bed, put him in the dumbwaiter, fold him in three, send him down to the kitchen where she had a wheelchair waiting for him, and put him in the wheelchair, pull him out of the dumbwaiter, and put him in a wheelchair, cover him with a blanket, entertain some friends, and then when the friends would leave because they wouldn't stay long, she'd then fold him back up into the dumbwaiter, send him up to the bedroom, and pull him out of the dumbwaiter. You think it through. we think it's sex. I've never seen anybody who was a dweeb smoke a cigarette and go, man, that guy is cool. I've never seen somebody who's cool not smoke a cigarette and go, God, that guy's a dweeb. Either you're sexy or you're not. This was something from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even today. The smoking is actually on the rise for the first time in many years, and that's the advent of e-cigarettes, because children who've been smoking e-cigarettes, usually within a year to two, will graduate to smoking tobacco. Nicotine being a naturally occurring substance found in tobacco.
Okay.
So for the first time in the longest time, they've actually seen a bump in the numbers of people smoking.
So in other words, it's going up again. It's coming back, you're saying.
Yeah. Well,
it's not. In the modern day that we're in, I mean, cigarettes are out of style. When you see someone with a cigarette and you see someone with a yoga mat, the one with the yoga mat is in style. And so it's really old-fashioned. We have, but go ahead. Often it's what?
Many times the person with the yoga mat is also somebody with a pack of cigarettes in her purse.
This is true, because I'm a yoga teacher as well, and I do smell the nicotine on the bodies in assessing the class. But it's still a good practice, because one is always helping themselves when they take on anything, of course, physical in a gym or a yoga studio. But the pleasure, back in the day when they smoked and they this was a sexual kind of fashion. Yes, anybody can become, old in a wheelchair, but not from cigarettes. Not everyone gets sick from cigarettes. Let's face it, there's a million things on the planet that are going to make us sick and kill us, like bad foods and things like that. But what I want to say about all this is that it really revolves around fulfilling your pleasure in your body and finding new ways to fulfill your pleasure. And it doesn't have to be exactly smoking a cigarette or exactly having sex. But what it can be is finding ways to fulfill your senses and become more of a whole person. And through, the Tantra training, what we teach people is how to fulfill the senses so that the pleasure lives on from the natural orgasm of the body. So the natural organism of the body, the natural organism of our body becomes the full body orgasm. And this is where our pleasure can be sought within our truth. But again, I understand that urge that people get, and different urges can be, could be journeyed another way, we'll say. Okay, so let me ask you another question. Here's one. This is a joke, why does a smoker cross the road?
It's because people who don't smoke tell them not to.
So the
more we tell somebody don't. Go on. I'm sorry.
A lot of negativity. Is that what you mean?
Well, the more somebody tells somebody don't smoke, the more it makes them want to smoke. The more somebody tells themselves don't smoke, it makes them want to smoke more. See, there are two big lies about quitting smoking for people. Lie number one, I have to stop, and lie number two, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's when people call me for one of those two or both of those reasons. But I'll ask them, how long have you been telling yourself you have to stop? And they'll tell me they've been saying it for years. But what do you still do? I still smoke. So here's the truth. You never have to quit smoking. You may hate yourself. Your health may suffer. These things can take you out in a way you can't dream about being taken out. But you can smoke anytime you want to. Then I'll ask them, how long have you been telling yourself you don't want to smoke? Long time. I'll tell them, well, you know what? That's not true either. The truth about us smokers isn't that we don't want to smoke. The truth is we do want to smoke at times. We just don't want to suffer the consequences. So my whole approach is teaching people how to use the urge to smoke as the way to stop. Every stop smoking methodology out there is designed to try to make the urge to smoke go away. I take Chantix because I don't want to smoke. I wear a patch because I don't want to smoke. I vape because I don't want to smoke. But you know what? The urges just keep coming. So my whole approach is learning how to really lean into those urges, how to use those urges as the way to stop instead of always trying to fight those urges.
So with that's good. So that your work involves working more with the mind and teaching people how to face this and move forward with it. In other words, come to the resistance, but look at your resistance.
Well, actually use your resistance.
Okay, so you look at it, you use it, and you use it to your advantage.
Yeah. I mean, it's the urge is a part of you. Hating your urges is hating yourself. I don't know about you, but I don't have much time to hate myself left. What's the point? You want to hate something, hate the frickin' cigarettes. Stop hating yourself.
Right. So learning to love yourself with this relationship with your own feelings, and it does take a lot of practice, and your work can really help people that are actual smokers and that want to at least get rid of that part of it and maybe start to tap into the senses, the full senses, the innocence that we're born with, because the cigarettes really clog the body up. They to me, they take away from the actual feeling of, your feelings can be much more heightened without the cigarettes.
As crazy as it sounds, I can have anybody off tobacco in 3 days. No tricks, no drugs, no gimmicks, no BS.
Okay, well, let's, is there anything else you want to say, Rocky? We are listening to an episode of Mindfulness, Sexuality, and Relationships. I'm your host, Anita DeFrancesco. And today, my very special guest is Rocky Rosen. He calls himself the Cigarette Whisperer. He's out of Los Angeles. And, Rocky, is there anything else that you want to tell us and at least give us some information on how to reach you?
Well, sure. First thing I want to tell you, you and I, whoever you are, you and I may or may not agree on much. But we can both agree that you deserve better than what tobacco is doing for you. Tobacco, nicotine, it's always a poison. You don't need to keep poisoning yourself. If you wish, you could stop. As far as contacting me, you can always go to my website. I do this one of two ways. I do this one-on-one, or I have my entire program on a website. It's called thecigarettewhisperer.com. Now, some people prefer working with me directly because I've had one client say, doing the cigarettewhisperer.com versus working with you is like getting Anthony Robbins tapes or working with Anthony Robbins. When I take on a client, I work for that client on a 24/7 basis. It is a 4-day program, but I'm available to my clients anytime. What else was there? Or you can just call me.
Okay.
My phone number is, I'll give it twice, is 818-961-6978. And I'll say that one more time, 818-961-6978. If I were looking at you right now, I would tell you I really don't care whether you smoke or whether you don't. But if you wish you didn't smoke, I really care for you. I really care about you because I was there.
Wonderful. So what I'll conclude here with this interview is that let's see if we can replace the unhealthy nicotine cigarette urge to maybe something more pleasurable, such as a sexual urge. And if you can sort of replace that urge with something else that's just better or healthier for you, that would be a step in the right direction to pleasure, love, and intimacy, and more strengthening your intimate life.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah.
I agree.
Yes. So I want to thank you, Rocky, for being with us today again. And this has been a wonderful time here in Los Angeles and Philadelphia, where we're both talking from the East and the West Coast, post-eclipse here, I'll say. Okay, so I want to thank you for being my guest again, and you're listening to an episode of Mindfulness, Sexuality, Relationships. I have been your host, Anita DeFrancesco, modern sex and relationship coach. You can find this podcast on my YouTube channel as well as the Tantra Wisdom group page on Facebook and my website, of course, tantrawisdom.com. And, okay, thank you all very much. Thank you.